Guys, I am currently in Castle Ring and I've just seen an actual real life snake. For the first time in my life in England, I've seen a bloody snake, mate. Castle Ring, a bit of history on Castle Ring. Absolutely magical, this place, especially around October time. Anyway, let's get into it, guys.
Castle Ring don't look like how people would usually imagine an Iron Age fort, because there's no standing stone walls, no ruined towers and nothing straight away that tells you that this was once a major stronghold. But what you're looking at is one of the most important prehistoric sites in Staffordshire, sitting high on the edge of Cannock Chase near Burntwood at the highest point of the chase itself. And that location matters because long before anyone dug ditches or built banks, this was already a commanding place to stand. From here, people once had huge views across the surrounding countryside, and although the trees block much of that now, Castle Ring would originally have looked out over a vast stretch of land. So even before you think about defence, status or power, the setting alone tells you that this place was chosen carefully. The fort has more than one line of defence, and that's one of the things that makes it so impressive once you understand what you're looking at. The shape is roughly five-sided, and around most of the site you can still trace the earthworks that once protected it, with multiple banks and ditches surrounding the area of about 3.6 hectares. This was not some small refuge or temporary shelter. It was a substantial enclosed site built to dominate the hilltop and protect whatever was happening inside. What makes it even more interesting is that those defences were not laid out evenly just for appearance. The eastern side, where the land is flatter and easier to approach, was defended more heavily, which suggests that people who built Castle Ring understood exactly where the weaker approach was. On the steeper side, the natural slope did more of the work for them, but on the other side, where access was easier, they strengthened the defences accordingly. That tells you that this was planned properly, with a close understanding of the land. One of the most interesting details is the entrance, because that gives you a better sense of how people actually moved in and out of the fort. The original entrance is thought to have been at the northeast corner, where the inner bank turns inwards rather than simply carrying straight on. And that matters because it suggests that this was not just an open gap in the earthworks, it was probably designed to control movement, to slow people down as they entered, and to make access easier to watch and defend. There's even the possibility that buried guard chambers survived beneath the surface, which means the entrance may once have been much more controlled as it first appears today. Castle Ring dates back to the Iron Age, probably sometime between the period of 1000 BC and 1 BC, though the fort itself is usually placed more firmly in the later part of that long stretch of time, and it may have remained in use until the Roman period. Some sources suggest it may have been abandoned around the middle of the 1st century AD, roughly when the Roman influence was spreading into this area. Even with some uncertainty around exact dates, what is clear is that Castle Ring belongs to that pre-Roman world, when different tribal groups were shaping the landscape in their own way. It's often linked with the Cornevi, a tribe usually associated with much of this region, although the site also lay not too far from what may have been a different territory, the Cortani. So the story is not completely neat and tidy, but what does seem clear is that this was a significant place in the landscape where territory, visibility, movement and status all mattered. Another thing that's easy to miss today is that although the defences are still visible, very little of the actual occupation inside the fort can be clearly seen on the ground. You don't walk into Castle Ring and immediately see obvious remains of a house, and the interior looks fairly open, but that does not mean it was empty. Surveys have suggested that buried beneath the surface there may be circular hut-like features, roughly 10 to 12 metres across, especially in the western part of the enclosure. That changes the picture completely, because it suggests that Castle Ring was not just a defended boundary wrapped around an empty space. It may well have contained roundhouses, and with them the everyday life of the people who lived here. Fires burning, food being prepped and tools being used. Inside a place that was also clearly built with defence in mind. That's one of the most useful things about those survey results, because they can help turn Castle Ring from an earthwork into a lived-in place. What makes Castle Ring stand out even more is that the story didn't end with the Iron Age, and inside the ring itself you can still see the foundations of a medieval hunting lodge, which shows that the site was still important many centuries later. This was not a place forgotten after prehistory, it was reused and reused in a way that suggests status. The remains point to a building that was far more than a simple shelter. It had thick walls, drainage and evidence that it may once have had an upper floor, or in other words this was a serious structure, and its presence inside the old hill fort tells you that this hilltop was still valued long after its original purpose had faded. By the medieval period, this part of Cannock Chase formed part of an important hunting landscape linked to the wider Bow Desert area, and Castle Ring appears to have become part of that later world as well. So the site carries more than one history at once, first an Iron Age hill fort, then later a medieval high status building, and after that yet more changes in the 18th and early 19th century. Parts of Castle Ring seem to have been altered again for landscape use. The inner bank may have been adapted into a broad walkway, and other routes were likely laid out as carriage rides linked with Bow Desert Hall. That means that some of the features people see today are not purely Iron Age. The site was reshaped over time to suit different needs and different tastes. That later reshaping may also explain one of the breaks in the defences, particularly on the southwest side, which is thought not to be the original. Instead, it was probably made later as part of those landscape routes, and that matters because it reminds you that Castle Ring is not perfectly untouched survival from prehistory. It's a place that's been reused, altered and reinterpreted again and again, which is part of what makes it so interesting. Even the name itself changed over time. Earlier records referred to it as Castle Hill, and later it became known as Castle Ring. Now that might sound like a small detail, but names shape how places are remembered. And by the time early researchers were writing about it, the site had already been viewed through layers of memory and changing local understanding. In the 19th century, excavation of the site uncovered parts of a medieval building and produced finds such as pottery, flint and metal objects. More recently, LiDAR surveys have helped refine what is known, not only picking up the medieval building more clearly, but also hinting at another possible structure nearby. That second feature is still uncertain. It may have been part of the same medieval complex, or it may belong to some later use of the site. So even now, Castle Ring is not fully explained. There's still things about it that remain open. Castle Ring is not just one story, it's not simply an Iron Age fort. It's a site where the land has been reused across centuries, where one age built over the traces of another, and where the shape of the ground still preserves decisions made thousands of years ago. The banks still tell you where defence mattered most, and the entrance still hints at control and watchfulness. The hidden circular features suggest homes and daily life, and the medieval remains show that this hilltop kept its value long after the Iron Age had passed. So when you stand at Castle Ring now, what you're really standing in is not just an old fort, but a layered piece of landscape history, a place chosen for its height, shaped for defence and lived in during prehistory, reused in the medieval period and altered again in the later centuries, and still holding questions that have not been fully answered. And that's what makes Castle Ring more than just a ring of earth on a hill. It's one of those rare places where the ground itself still holds the outline of several different worlds, all in the same space.